Now then, welcome to another episode of Barnsley Biker Video Diaries, and I'd like to start off by saying a right big thank you to all my new subscribers and to everybody that took the time to watch my last video about the motorcycle industry in the UK, and all the comments. A lot of people commented in agreement. There were very few negative, and the ones that were negative did have a reasoned argument to put. So very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Right then, moving on to this episode. Winter's arrived in its true fashion here in the UK. Basically wet and windy, so chances of getting out to have any sort of decent ride is going to be few and far between, shall I say, between now and spring. So if we get a chance, we'll get out, and I'll do a few videos out there on the bike. So it got me to thinking, and after my last video I thought, why not do a few more monologues to the camera, shall we say. And for a while I've been making a list with a view to perhaps putting them into writing, some of the stories that I've collected over the years while I was working in the motorcycle trade. Some of them hilarious, some of them sad, some of them publishable, some of them not. And then I thought, you know what, why not share them, the ones that I can share, with you guys. So I probably do over the winter period, if there's not a lot else going on out there on the road, maybe do the odd video in this series, which I'm going to call Tales from the Showroom Floor. Okay, so at the end, yeah, let me know what you think. If you want more, let me know. If you don't, then we'll do something else. But the first story, shall we say, that I wanted to share with you is it's a customer complaint, basically, that took place. Give you a bit of background. Back in, I think it was 1985, Suzuki launched, to a lot of hype and expectation, the RG500 Gamma, championed as a 500 GP bike with lights, and press did big it up big time. Probably helped a little bit. I've got a feeling that maybe when the bike finally arrived here in the UK, Suzuki GB were mildly disappointed with it. Didn't think it was going to live up to the hype, and allegedly they took a handful of the first bikes that arrived in the UK and handed them over to that famous well-known two-stroke tuner Stan Stevens for him to release some of the true potential of the bike, shall we say. And so half a dozen or so bikes allegedly were tweaked by him. There's even, I've heard rumours that some of them were overboard, so that they were no longer 500cc but 525 or 550. I don't know, I've never had it confirmed either way. It's one of those urban myths, I suppose. But this is what allegedly took place, which meant that by the time these bikes, this was intended to have been Suzuki GB's RG500 press fleet, the bikes that were going to let the motorcycle press loose on. And back in 85, we'd got Performance Bike and Superbike and Bike Magazine, and they used to test the bikes in the manner that they expected them to be used. It was a bit of an age of the two-wheel hooligan image still. So yeah, these bikes were launched to the press, and lo and behold, the RG500 was something of an animal. By the time it arrived on the showroom floors, it had sort of filtered down that perhaps the bikes we were getting out of the showrooms weren't quite the same as the bikes that the press had used. Truth being told, it was still a potent bike. I mean, it was still capable of 130, 135 mile an hour and give you some real good thrills. It was a lightweight package, aluminium frame, a 4-cylinder rotary valve induction two-stroke, and there's still a lot around. At the time, because there were 4-stroke super bikes, or whatever you want to call them, that were actually quicker than the RG500. It didn't really sell in huge numbers. Supply was limited. I think I did a bit of research. I think worldwide there were less than 10,000 built in that first year. So not that many around. They did sell because there were limited numbers, but what we found, as I think it only had a 2-year production run, 85 through to 87, and what we found was once Suzuki had stopped producing them, there was a massive demand for second-hand ones. So as soon as we got one, it didn't sit on the showroom floor for very long at all. So brings me back to the story that I'm going to share with you. It was a Sunday afternoon, as memory serves. It must have been, because I was the senior manager on site at the time, being sales manager. Most managers only worked Monday to Saturday, but me working in the sales department, I was in charge on Sundays as for my sins. And so memory serves, and memory fades sometimes, but memory serves, it must have been a Sunday, because there was no workshop open, there was no workshop manager on site, and the general manager wasn't on site. So it was in the season, probably midsummer-ish, nice day outside, and as was the way back then in Doncaster, we were very busy, as much as anything, just with people coming to have a wander around. The car park was bustling, showroom was busy, etc. Anyway, we're going about our business when one of the salesmen attracts my attention and says he's got a customer that'd like to speak to a manager. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? He says, well, he's got a complaint, something about a bike he's bought. So, as was the way, bring him into my office and I'll sit him down and we'll have a chat, which they duly did. This young man had travelled with his friend to come and have a talk to somebody about his complaint, shall we say. So him and his friend came and sat in my office, and I asked him just to, fill me in on what the problem was. He was obviously got himself all psyched up, and he went in straight into his complaint. And basically, from what I could gather, he'd bought an RG500, and he was convinced there was something wrong with it because it was down on performance. Now I was racking my brains at this point, because we knew obviously the RG500 second-hand was a desirable bike, and I couldn't remember selling an RG500 in the last 2-3 months. And when I'd asked him how long he'd had it, he said he'd had it 2 or 3 months. And I was saying, so just to clarify the situation, I said, so when did you buy it from us? And he says 2 or 3 months. I says, you bought it here from Doncaster? Oh, no, he says. Didn't buy it from Doncaster. He bought it from our Peterborough branch. I'm like, okay. So why have you brought the bike to Doncaster to come and complain to us? He says, well, I'm wanting my money back. I says, yeah, but you bought the bike from Peterborough. You've got to give them the opportunity to, if you've got a problem with the bike, to have a look at it, or for them to try and resolve the problem. It transpired he'd already had it back to Peterborough twice. First occasion, they'd taken it in the workshop and couldn't find anything wrong with it, despite him being adamant that the bike was well down on performance, not as quick as it should be. The second time, they'd agreed to give it a good service, check it out, etc. So they'd changed the spark plugs, they'd changed the oil, they'd checked everything. Made no difference. The bike was still the same. Peterborough were quite happy that there was nothing wrong with it. The customer was adamant that there was something wrong with it. And at this point, he's becoming quite irate. And as I explained to him, I said, look, he was demanding his money back. And I said, I'm not in a position to authorise that. He was in Doncaster. He knew Doncaster was where the head office of the company was. He says, well, there must be somebody here that can, because this is head office. I'm like, well, it's Sunday. There's nobody works on a Sunday. So I offered, in the first instance, to let him leave the bike with us and have it inspected by our workshop, have a word with somebody on Monday, see if we could resolve the situation, and I'd find him some way of getting home, and we'd get the bike back to him once we'd had a chance to have a look at it. Again, not happy with that. So, excuse me. I excused myself. I said, do you mind if I just speak to Peterborough and just see, if they can help me with it? So I went into another office to make a phone call to Peterborough. They confirmed most of what he said. Basically, they had the customer come back to them twice, but they couldn't find anything wrong with the bike. And within the limitations of what they could do out on the road legally, bear in mind this bike's capable of, the press claimed 145 mile an hour, real world terms probably 135, something like that. Within the limitations of what was legal to do on the road, they'd not found anything wrong with the performance of the bike. It performed just like any other second-hand RG500 that they'd had through the showroom in their time. So I went back to customer and I said, look, this is all I can offer you. Peterborough have had a look at the bike. They don't think there's anything wrong with it. I can't do anything for you today. At this point, he starts getting really, really angry. And I had to calm him down again. And I said, just explain to me. You're telling me it's down on performance. Explain to me really, really what's wrong. And he always, the friend he'd come with was riding a GPZ 600. And he says most of the time when he's out riding, he's riding with this friend who's got a GPZ 600. I says, right, okay. He says, well, when we're out on the roads around in Lincolnshire, and some cracking roads out Lincolnshire way, he says, I can't keep up with my mate. And he's on a GPZ 600, and it's not as fast as an RG500. I'm like, okay. And bear in mind that a GPZ 600 is probably good for about 125 mile an hour, so it is 10 mile an hour down probably in real world terms on what an RG500. But both reasonably good handling bikes, RG a lot lighter. And I'm like, but that's what you're basing your evidence that there's something wrong with the bike. You can't keep up with your friend. He says, yeah. And at this point, his friend interjects. He says, yeah. He says, and I can't understand it, he says, because occasionally we'll swap bikes. He says, and when I'm on the RG500 and he's on my GPZ 600, he still can't keep up with me. At which point I looked from one to the other, and you could see in their faces the penny had dropped on what they just said, and that literally they'd defeated their own argument almost. And I just looked and said, maybe that's the problem. Your friend is just a slightly quicker rider than what you are. At which point the young man and his friend were very angry and stormed out of my office. I said to one of my salesmen, just keep an eye on them because they're not happy. I said, I'm not being able to do anything to help them. Just keep an eye on them. Well, apparently somebody had pointed out where the head office for the company was, which was round the back of the site where the showroom was, in a separate building. A few minutes later, I was told that they were literally trying to batter the door down at head office. Well, it's Sunday, there's nobody in. Somebody, we shared the site with a car dealership belonging to the same company, and one of the salesmen from the car dealership went across and asked them what they were playing at, and basically had said very similar to me, you need to talk to somebody on the bike side or whatever. Next thing I know, the young man's come back. He started up his RG500. Directly opposite where my office was, there was a single doorway, barely big enough to get a bike through. He started the RG500 up and he's trying to ride it through that doorway into the showroom. Now, with care, you could push bikes through there, but you'd got bikes on display one side, you've got a wall the other side and a coffee machine. So getting a bike through was tricky. He gets himself stuck in the doorway, revving the Watsits off this RG500 to the point which one of my salesmen walked up, took the key out of the bike, and we helped him push it back out onto the car park. He was determined he wanted his money back, determined he was leaving the bike there. I repeated what I'd said to him, leave it with us and we'll have a look at it. Speak to Peterborough on Monday, up to you. Next thing, he's in the car park we had a raised section around the showroom, and he's holding court there telling everybody what a set of so-and-sos we were, because we wouldn't give his money back because he wasn't quick enough when he was riding his RG500 to keep up with his mate. If you weren't there, you wouldn't believe it. But yeah, that's one of the customer complaints that I remember with a wry grin on my face. The lad that wasn't as quick as his mate and was blaming the bike. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully short and sweet. Like I said, I've got a few more that I can share with you. I've got several that probably wouldn't get through the YouTube censors. But for now, remember, please like, please subscribe. I am the Barnsley Biker. For now, I'll see thee.